In this section, we're going to take a look at 3 locks. We're going downriver. We're going to look at lock 34, lock 33, and lock 32. Stay with us. Before we start on our trip, let me ask you this. What lock house was hit by a train? Here we're looking at the overflow for the lock. Sweep it over and seeing the main lock. We'll go take a better look. Down in the center of the lock, we can see some of the stone on the left has been moved around. There's been some bad floods up here. The flood of 36 really hurt a lot of things on the river. The lock was made with limestone. Here on the upper end was some red sandstone, and they think maybe it was replacement stone. The water running down and into the lock. And it stops there and probably seeps out. The indentation for the gate on both sides of the lock, and looking down it, does have some water in it. Well, we see a piece missing here or something. Over there at the overflow, we see some stonework on the wall. This is where the lock keeper's house was. It was a brick house. It stood firm in other floods, but the flood of 36 wiped it out. The family just escaped before it collapsed. Over and looking at the other side, that concrete on top was the front porch. We'll swing over here to the river. You can see the water level's not that far down. Swing back. Downhill side, we can see where the gates were. See if we see any other marks. We can see where the metal was, the ironwork. Oh, and over here. Here's some rope burns in the rock. It's more gorgeous. It's probably from the boats being pulled along and getting in a groove and just slowly and slowly wearing away at it. Looking over to the overflow, we can see that it's been filled with dirt. Now there's a path out to the road. Looking back at the lock on the right, we can see that it was covered over. So that was a road at one time that came across down to the lock. Here we are looking at several things. First off, there's a lock on the bottom. To the left is the overflow. That looked like it was also a dry dock at one time. Behind that's an old stone house. And to the right of it, if you see that tan structure, that's the beginning of the railroad tunnel that those tracks you see go into. There was Amtrak coming out of the tunnel. Now this looks different. A notch in the side of the wall to like lower boards to adjust the level of the water there. We swing to the right and look where the gates were, and they're a lot lower. I'm sure this lock has been filled in somewhat. We look down. Now at these locks, we can see a pin over here, a couple of them, and over there on that side we can see where there was ironwork. It's gone now. Look down, it's mostly limestone, but there's some of that red sandstone here and there. Here's the imprint of something that was probably made out of iron before. It's gone now. We're down here at the lower gate. See each side. See where there used to be some metal work, which is gone now, except for a pin. You can gaze up here through the lock. And then out back into the canal. See here what used to be the end of the lock because of the curved stones. And it had this other stuff built up against it later on. Here we are looking right up through the center of the lock. We swing to our right, we can see it's rounded there, and some gates. Let's go peek through. Well, it looks like a gated tunnel. The gates were probably put on there modern to keep people out, but just goes back in there to darkness. Feel cool air coming out. Down to lock 32, which the upper end of it is in pretty bad shape. So we walk down here, look at it. You can see where the gates were on this side and over there on the other. Here was the sill. There is water in it. As we look down, wow, the right side's all crumbled. The river side. And then out through. Back behind the lock, we can see some stonework. That was the lock keeper's house. When lock 32 was built, the lock house wasn't built at that time. They just built the foundation with the intention of coming back later. Meanwhile, the railroad came by and laid the track, not paying any attention to the foundation, and put it too close. So later on, the lock house was built. The train came by, hit the lock house. The only lock house hit by a train, lock 32. Most of this looks like limestone. Here we are at the lower end. We can see the indentation for the gate and pretty much nothing on this side. Over there at the overflow, we see it's covered. Maybe because the house was up there. They said a lot of times that meant there was a road that went over. Look down through here at the lock. We look at the lock, we swing out to the river, and we're not too much higher than the river right now. So when it's really up, you can see why this is taking a beating.